Whether it be because of their German family heritage,
Welcome to the #1 celebration in Fredericksburg, Texas, Oktoberfest.
or because of movies they watch. Americans feel like they got a pretty good idea of what Germany is like. But when we first moved from the US to Germany, we learned that we actually knew nothing about this country. Okay, we knew a little bit, but not everything. Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. I am Donnie along with my wife Aubrey. We are two Americans currently living in Germany with our family, sharing all of our experiences living and traveling throughout Europe. Every country has misconceptions of other countries. However, as we have lived in Germany for 6 years and infiltrated German society to see what they're really like from the inside, I've come to know this country and culture pretty well. And by culture, I mean cultures, because no, not every part of Germany is like this. In fact, I received my German citizenship earlier this year, and in order to do this, I had to take a German citizenship exam, which I received a perfect score on. So if there's anybody you should blindly trust about what Germany is like, it's obviously me. But really, there are many things that before we moved to Germany, we did not expect to learn is either part of German culture, normal parts of everyday life here, or come from Germany that we thought were actually American things. And that's exactly what I'm going to talk about today in my video. German things you don't know, and some that might make you go whoa. When Americans think of German food, there are a few things that immediately come to mind. Sausages, beer, sauerkraut, and schnitzels. Now, surprisingly, we could get off into the weeds when it comes to the schnitzel about whether it's really a German dish or not. I mean, for sure, a Wiener Schnitzel is Austrian, a fact that surprises Americans, although the obvious signal is in the name, Wiener, although most Americans read that Wiener, and they wouldn't know that Vienna is Wien in German, so perhaps not so obvious. But one thing Americans don't know about Germany is that one of Germany's most beloved foods is a sandwich. And not a German sandwich, but Turkish. Well, even that could be debated a little. I'm talking about the döner, or as Americans like to call it once they learn about it, the doner, or even worse, the Donner. After World War II, Germany needed workers. In the 1960s, Germany and Turkey made some agreements where Turkish workers were allowed to come to Germany to work and were known as Gastarbeiter, or guest workers. Of course, with any culture moving to another, they bring their influences, and one of these influences was food. In Turkey, they had large spits of meat, veal or lamb, for example, that they would rotate and grill, slice off, then serve with tomatoes, yogurt, rice, maybe flatbread, etc. In the 70s and 80s came another craze: fast food. And this is where the debate about whether Döner in Germany being German or Turkish food can kind of start. I am now holding a Döner purely to make you jealous that I have one and you don't. For sure, it has Turkish roots, no argument, but Döner in today's form in Germany was definitely altered to meet the new demand for fast food, and the flavors were Germanized for the German palate. This meant putting the meat in bread, adding lots of sauces, and even the meat being less likely to be lamb, but more beef and chicken. When you order one in a shop, they will ask if you want it spicy, but knowing all well that to a German, fresh cracked pepper is a death sentence, they will then make it spicy for you if you say yes. It's hard to hold this and not try a little bit. In 2022, Döner officially took its rightful place as the #1 preferred food in Germany, dethroning sausage drowning in curry ketchup, of which I am holding once again just to make you jealous that I have one and you don't. Now, personally, this may be controversial, although not as controversial to say it if it were still before 2021, but I don't understand the hype around currywurst. In the US, it's taboo to put ketchup on sausages like a hot dog, and if you say otherwise, you're wrong. Döner should not have taken until 2022 to win as the best food in Germany. This should have been done back in 1970 when it first hit the streets. But if you're an American coming to Germany, do yourself a flavor favor and get yourself a Döner, don't call it a donor, and live in German food bliss. I mean, Turkish? Food bliss? Although Americans cannot normally pronounce them correctly, there are quite a few German brands that Americans are well aware are German brands. Often these brands actually even have a very positive connotation to them in the US because they are associated with Germany. German brands are often considered high quality, unmatched in engineering, high class, and sexy. I'm of course referring to Birkenstock. Okay, most of those descriptors aren't good for that brand, but brands like Birkenstock, Mercedes, Volkswagen, and Porsche, yes, those are how Americans say them, are well known to be German brands. However, there are a few brands that always get a shock out of Americans when they learn, if they ever learn, are actually German brands. And part of the reason they aren't known to be German brands is because the names don't sound German like perhaps those others do, like Adidas. Wait, that's not how you're supposed to say it? Adidas? And it gets its name from the founder Adolf Dassler. Oh, that's a pretty German sounding name. Yeah, we probably should have known that was a German brand. But Adidas's rival Puma is also a brand most Americans aren't aware is a German brand, but once you learn that Germany has a history of brothers feuding, like the Aldi brothers who split the country in two, you won't be surprised that Rudolf Dassler was the feuding other half of the Dassler brothers who split from Adolf to divide their hometown into Adidas and Puma wearers. All Americans my age for sure grew up knowing the special feeling of opening up your lunchbox at school to be surprised that your mom packed you a Capri Sun. Again, yes, that's how Americans say it. So obviously something so ingrained in Americana is an American brand, right? Well, that would make no sense to include it in this video if that was the case, so no, this is a German brand. Brought to market by not the same, but a different Rudolf in Heidelberg, Germany in 1969, but under the name Capri Sonne. Yes, with a name like that, maybe Americans would pick up that it wasn't an American brand, but the name was changed to English for the English-speaking market, but affectionately known as Capri Sonne in Germany. That was at least until 2017 when the name officially just became the English version, Capri Sun, or Capri Sun in Germany as well, utterly destroying a big part of nostalgia for millions of German millennials. But I would be interested in knowing from our German viewers, don't you still just call it Capri Sonne out of habit, and will you ever change that? German trains have a very, specific reputation that Americans aren't always aware of before traveling to Germany. They think Germans are efficient, punctual, and they have a vast train system. Nine. So they think they'll just use that the whole time that they travel in Europe. And then they end up stranded in their college t-shirts and leggings in imaginary places like Bielefeld on their way to discover where their great-great-great-grandfather once was born in Germany, thus making them Germans. But DB's unreliableness is not the only thing that Americans don't know about trains in Germany. That stems a lot from the fact that Americans don't really know how trains work. Well, I mean, Americans understand there are wheels and they run on tracks. They know how they physically work, more or less. I mean, more they don't know the process for riding a train. You might be surprised to learn that even though most of the chatter online is that the US doesn't have trains, the reality is that the US does actually have trains. In fact, in the northeastern part of the US, the train is a legitimate means of transportation, and from what I've heard, I've never been there, fairly nice trains. Even in Oklahoma, where I'm from, we have a commuter train that connects our state capital with the Texas state capital, Dallas, Texas. Wait, no, Dallas is like Sydney, Australia, a city everybody thinks is the capital, but it's actually just a big city.
Well, that's Dallas. Dallas, indeed.
For most Oklahoma and Texans, though, this train is more of a fun ride rather than a legitimate means of transportation. But again, I've heard it's nice because I've never actually done it. But although trains do technically exist in some parts of the United States, most Americans don't take a train anywhere, and our only experience traveling somewhere is by car or plane. So when Americans come to Germany, or really Europe as a whole, look at the train schedule, see their train departs at 12:30, they think, wait, how early do we have to be there? Because they are comparing it to their lived experiences with air travel. So surprise, there was actually absolutely no security lines or checking in for trains. Even family and friends who come and visit seem to hesitantly accept the fact that I tell them we only need to arrive a few minutes before the train leaves because they think we probably should be there at least an hour early or something. To be honest, this has always been something that I have loved about train travel because you don't have to show up 3 hours early, get your body scanned, then sit around all day waiting for your departure time like you do with air travel. Although I do miss the free full body massages from airport security, in Germany, you just have to show a few minutes before your train is supposed to depart before sitting around all day waiting for your delayed DB train to depart. However, because of the direction air travel has gone, it has always felt a little strange to me that this is how train travel works. Almost like this is a massive security risk that ultimately will change one day. I'm not advocating that it does change, and I hope this never has to change. It's just interesting to me that it's exactly opposite from air travel and that there is no security checks. But I would like to know from our German viewers, how often do you take a train trip these days? Again, when Americans think of German food, they think of the sausages and beer. But what rarely, if ever, comes to mind is bread. For a German, I basically just spat on their Oma's grave with a statement like that because of how proud of the bread they are. I think, sure, Americans know about pretzels because they love to dip them in cheese dip or covered in cinnamon sugar from a shopping mall. But I personally, along with many Americans, think of France as the king of bread. No! Americans truly don't know Germany for its bread, or if they do know of some German breads, they don't fully appreciate how obsessed Germans are with it. So here's a bready breakdown of some flowery facts about the gluten glutton Germans and how ingrained bread is in German society. There is a word in German, Brotkultur, which is used to describe the importance of bread in Germany, and it literally means bread culture. German bread culture is so important that there is an official German Bread Institute, which part of their role is to track and register all bread types produced in Germany. A register that currently claims over 3,200 types of bread. That's an important fact because Germany isn't just known for its high quality of bread, but by an unmatched variety of bread as well. Brotkultur isn't the only full corn vocabulary associated with bread in Germany, cementing it as an important part of German life, but there are other words like Brotzeit, literally bread time, which is a snack time that consists of, you guessed it, bread, and things like cold cuts. Then there's a German word for dinner, Abendbrot, literally evening bread, which honestly looks a lot like Brotzeit again because it's generally bread with cold cuts and cheeses. In Ulm, Germany, you can visit the German Museum of Bread and Art. I visited once. Honestly, wouldn't really recommend it, but it does exist. Have you ever heard of those UNESCO World Heritage Sites that have specific status of culturally significant and important places that need to be preserved and protected? Places like the Great Pyramids, the Great Wall of China, the Colosseum, and the Taj Mahal? Yeah, well, German Brotkultur was added to the list of UNESCO Intangible Cultural Heritage in 2014. You've heard of wine sommeliers, but have you heard of Germany's bread sommeliers? Well, they have them. And two of probably the most important things you need to know about how seriously Germans take bread in Germany, this is not considered bread in Germany, unlike in the US where this is bread. In Germany, this is only good for toasting, and that's it. And two, one of Germany's most beloved TV characters is Bernd das Brot, a perpetually pessimistic and depressed loaf of bread whose catchphrase, if you will, is Mist, the German equivalent of crap. Now, next time you imagine a stereotypical German, swap out the beer and sausage for a loaf of bread and a Brötchen, and you will have nailed it. Well, maybe keep the beer too. Americans' first time in a German house is always chock full of culture shocks, but perhaps none as big as, well, see if you can guess it in the comments before I say it. In April this year, I was talking to my dad and he surprised me by saying he found a flight deal to Germany to come visit us in June. He had checked the weather that day and we had touched into the 80s randomly. For our German viewers, it's about 26 to 27 degrees Celsius. He asked if it was shaping up to be a hot summer and I said, I don't think so. We just randomly have some higher temps than we were used to right now. Well, they ended up coming at the end of June, and much to all our surprise, we had temps ranging from 90 to 99 degrees. Again, for our Germans, that's about 35 to 37 degrees Celsius. Fortunately, my parents had visited during the summer in Germany, and this wasn't their first heat wave to experience, so they knew coming into it something that many Americans aren't aware of about Germany, and that's, have you already guessed it in the comments? Air conditioning isn't common in German homes. But a week after the trip, I was talking with one of my best friends back home and telling him about the heat wave we had while my parents were here, and when I told him how my parents were troopers through it even though we don't have aircon, he about flipped. He was even more shocked when I told him that a majority of homes in Germany don't have air conditioning. Now, I say we don't have aircon, but we actually have these things I curse at the beginning of every heat wave that I drag out from the depths of our basement that weigh a ton and a half. But we have to consider a few things when we talk about this. Where I come from in Oklahoma, in July, the average high is hotter than a sinner sitting front row at a tent revival wearing polyester. Mid-30s Celsius. And it is very much not uncommon for temps to get 100 plus degrees. 40s. In Germany, we have heat waves, but the average high in July is 20 degrees cooler than Oklahoma, only around 75 degrees. I wish I'd have to keep doing this around 23 to 24 degrees Celsius. So, as you can imagine, the climate itself plays a big role in this difference of prevalence of Klimaanlage, as we say in Germany. Someone from Oklahoma today can't imagine living without AC, so when they hear we don't have it here, they don't initially think about the fact that for a vast majority of the year, you simply wouldn't need it in Germany. However, even though Oklahoma is a place where it stays hotter than a billy goat in Satan's pepper patch wearing wool socks and trying to square dance with a blowtorch, there are other parts in the US that are higher in latitude than Germany, where it isn't as frequent to have AC. Even Aubrey's brother, who lived in Washington State, didn't have air conditioning in the last house that they lived in. And yes, we can consider how homes are constructed, but I object to any German claim that even if a German home was built in Oklahoma, you would be comfortable without air conditioning. Just no. A German heat wave is a cold snap in Oklahoma. Overall though, as of 2020, nearly 90% of US households used air conditioning. In Germany, only 19% of homes use some form of air conditioning, but a further 19% plan on buying one. The trend in the US and Germany for using air conditioning is going up, and I've even noticed every summer in Germany more and more of our town installing units or hoses hanging out of windows for portable units like we have. But if you're an American looking to travel to Europe in the summer, don't complain to your hotel or Airbnb for not having AC, and plan on not getting that freezing cold Russian relief when going from outside to inside. But do expect to get a sniffly nose when you return to the States and go from weather hotter than a $2 pistol on the 4th of July to AC that's colder than my ex-girlfriend's heart at a family reunion in Alaska. To see who made it this far into the video, the random question of the week is: do you use a vibrating toothbrush or an old-fashioned one without batteries? Thanks so much for watching this video, guys. Be sure to hit those like and subscribe buttons, and I will see you in my next video. Legitimate means of transportation, and from what I've heard, I've never been there. Fairly nice trains.